Let's just dive right in. What would you say most people get wrong about exercise when it comes to improving their health and changing their body?
I think historically, a lot of people would overlook resistance training and exercise. It just automatically went to aerobic activity. And I also am appreciative. A lot of people think, oh, cardio is not good. No, cardio is great. Aerobic exercise is awesome. But historically, people would just not gravitate towards resistance training or not include that in any part of their fitness program. And it's getting better. I think it's getting much better.
Yeah, I feel like, was Arnold Schwarzenegger, I mean, he was like pivotal. Arnold, right? Arnold,
Yeah.
Wasn't he pivotal in terms of helping foster wider adoption for the art and
Absolutely.
science of weightlifting?
Yeah, I think he brought lifting weights to the masses. That is my view of what Arnold has done.
So cool.
Yeah.
So when it comes to resistance training, for somebody who's just starting out, what would you say constitutes best practices for adopting, programming, initiating, and ultimately sustaining a resistance training regimen?
So I love the question in terms of, you use the word sustaining, and I'm just going to broaden out for a moment. Lean into what you like, because if you don't like doing something, you're not going to do it for very long. So within that, I always encourage people, if they say, hey, I really don't like lifting weights, well, let's experiment with all different styles. We can use kettlebells, we can do dumbbells, machines, even barbells. Let's find what you like and then incorporate that in. So I love what will be sustainable, and the answer is what you enjoy doing. But in terms of a beginner, I would say let's just get you in once a week initially, because if you're not careful, you're gonna be sore, and a lot of beginners do way too much. And then they're in a lot of pain, and then that just scares them away from doing resistance training forever. Like, oh, that hurt too much. And also, I want to encourage. I love fitness professionals. It's who I train at my university. So it's often a good idea to work with a fitness professional when you're starting resistance training. Let them show you the correct form, how to set up the machines. Are you holding the dumbbells correctly? So working with a trainer, at least initially, is one of the best investments somebody can make.
It's really solid advice. It's also, we were talking offline, the value of warming up, which is something that, I personally often take for granted. And I think one of the reasons why I had suffered from back pain for so many years, stemming back 10 years to, prior to a back injury sustained from back squatting, I hadn't warmed up when I performed this back squat, which I injured a disc, and that led to 10 years of back pain. And, thankfully I recently had a surgery where, it's actually changed my life. But is warming up something that's generally considered smart to do? Because I know that there's, tangentially, stretching is something that's always being debated on social media. The value of stretching. Is warming up sort of as contentious?
I don't think it's as contentious as stretching, because stretching is, like you said, contentious. I love this argument about not warming up. It's the phrase was, "Did you ever see a cheetah warm up?" So no, we don't. But I know in my own life when I have gotten injured, and again, when I was younger, minimal warm up. Now that I'm in the middle age years, if I don't warm up, it's not a good workout. I remember literally within the last month, I squat once a week, or at least that's my goal. My lab, I was working out in my university lab, and it was cold, and I was in a hurry, and I didn't do my normal warm up, and I'm just like, I got to get my squat workout in. And I was in my first set, and I felt something, and I was like, I'm done. Like and now it's fresh in my mind. So for the rest of my life, if I cannot do my warm up, I'm not going to get under. I'm not going to squat. So to me, it's more logical. I can't say I've done a ton of research on warming up, but if we just look at what professional athletes do, I don't think you'll find a professional athlete that does not have a warm-up routine. I mean, it's in every sporting event I've ever gone to. My daughter is a gymnast. She does gymnastics. There's like a 30-minute warm-up routine. So if I just observe what the highest or the elite athletes are doing, what I experience for myself, to me it makes sense, even though I can't point to research.
Well, success leaves clues, right?
Yes.
And there is merit to the concept of bro science to some degree, is there not?
Oh yeah, I in many cases, bro science. What I do is essentially I follow behind bro science by like 5 years in many cases and say, hey, I'm just validating what bro science has done. And in some instances, I'm not validating what bro science, but I'm bodybuilders and the bro science is they're the ones pioneering the fitness trends. It's the nerdy scientists that come along and with their little nerdy pen and say, well, what's going on here?
Yeah, no, I get it. It's such a funny concept, bro science. So when like conceptualizing a workout regimen, I mean, I know that there's debate between like body part splits as compared to full body workouts. Even this is something that even I get confused about. Like I really enjoy the body part split. And I feel like it supports the way that I like to go to the gym, and I pretty much like to go every day. And so by adopting a body part split, it allows me to pretty much do something in the gym from a resistance training standpoint every day. But I know that there's debate in terms of efficacy when it comes to like building mass and strength, that some people will argue it's better to do full body with fewer workouts a week. What's your take?
So just conceptually, I'm going to just broaden out for a moment. A body part perspective is, to me, that's the best way to structure your workouts if you're interested in building muscles, kind of trying to enhance your body composition. If I'm training an athlete, I wouldn't design a program that's a body part split. I would look at the movement patterns from their sport, and I would be designing workouts that would adhere to their movement patterns. And then somebody else, if I have a power lifter, well, it's not movement patterns and it's not body parts. I'm literally programming for exercises: squat, bench press, deadlift. So what you suggest is how I think most fitness people who embrace a fitness lifestyle, it's exactly how I structure my workouts. It's body parts. And then you get into full body versus all the other options. And I think the way to look at this, and in my head, I've read every single study on this that's been published in the English language, so I'm somewhat up to date on this.
So cool.
Well, I get paid to do the research. When you're looking at a body part perspective, there's a lot of unknowns, but the one known is we don't want to only stimulate or hit a body part once per week. We know that hitting a body part more than once per week is better than once. Now, is 3 better than 6? Not according to the research. 2 versus 4, they're both equal. So anything more than 1 is better than 1 day per week. And how I like to structure the programming is, how many days do you go to the gym? So in your case, let's say you go 6 days per week, and I've been there myself. In fact, my last 6-day per week split was a whole body routine for 6 days. I loved it. They were pretty short workouts because I was going every day. But if you're only going to go twice, that's another reason to do whole body workouts. And then when you're in this sweet spot, 3 days per week. A very common option there is to do 2 lower body, 1 upper body, and then reverse that the next week. Then you do 2 upper body and 1 lower body. Or if you're 4 days per week, 2 lower body, 2 upper body. But if you like full body workouts, that can be across the board. And I like that style of training. I like stimulating each muscle group in my workouts.
Yeah.
Oh, and let me say why I don't like lower. If I'm doing all lower body, that kind of crushes me at this point. So I'm like, no, I look at upper body as kind of like a break from squatting or deadlifting or doing leg presses or so.
Yeah. And how much? So twice a week is what you should be striving to hit each muscle group.
Yeah, on a body part basis, I'd say at least twice. If you're hitting it twice, you're doing everything you can do to maximize the hypertrophic potential of that muscle. You can do it 4 times. And let me also say, I'm assuming here that the total volume is the same. So when volume is equated, if you're going to do 20 sets let's just say if you're going to do 10 sets per week, we don't want to do all 10 sets on one day. But whether you split those 10 sets up into 2 days, 5 sets Monday, 5 sets Thursday, or you do 3, 3, 4, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So assuming that volume is the same, it doesn't matter how you distribute the frequency.
How fatigued should your muscles be at the end of one of those workouts? I mean, should you be leaving gas in the tank if you know that you're going to be hitting that same muscle group again 3 days later?
So my thinking on this, let's just look at the 2 extremes here. So the one extreme is when you're doing a body part and you have a weight. The extreme is you take that set or every set to absolute failure. You cannot physically do another repetition. There's one extreme. And then the other extreme is if you could do 10 reps and you decide to do 2. So there's the other extreme. Like you're not even close to fatiguing that muscle. When I've looked at this research, the stimulus for hypertrophy, and this is more important for hypertrophy than strength.
Meaning what? Growing your muscles.
Yeah, getting a bigger muscle. Yes. You want to be what I call near failure. There is no advantage to going to absolute failure if the goal is to build muscle. There's no harm in that, but I would say there is a harm when it comes to recovery, just being much more tired. If you're going to get the same anabolic stimulus by stopping a repetition or 2 short, there's no reason to go to absolute failure. And if you're an athlete, we do not want to go to failure. Going to failure decreases power production acutely and chronically. So athletes should not go to failure. They're getting too fatigued. And if you think, here's how I've internalized this. An athlete needs to train for speed, explosiveness, and power. Think of that last repetition when you go to failure. Is that a fast or it's a very slow repetition? So in a way, you're actually training your body to be slower. So I personally don't like training to failure for athletes. And I know that it's not adding any anabolic or it's not going to build a bigger muscle than if I stop 2 repetitions, even 3 repetitions shy of that.
When I do, say for example, we'll take my chest for example. When I'm like doing a chest workout, I will routinely I'll pick 3 different exercises and I'll do 3 sets of each exercise.
In one workout?
In one workout.
Okay, yep.
And I'll go pretty damn close to failure, if not going beyond failure with like drop sets and partials and things like that. Yeah, so that's like 9 sets. And then generally within that week, I'll do that again. So am I doing too much volume? Would you say
so that would be 18 sets?
Yeah.
So volume, the way that I look
and I'm natty, so I'm not, augmented in any way. Like for a natural weightlifter, is that too much volume?
No, not at all.
Oh, interesting.
I'll give the context for volume. 3 categories. 1 to 9 or 1 to 10 is considered low volume on terms of 1 to 10 sets per week for a body part. And we already said you were doing 18 per week. So you would be on the higher end of moderate volume, where we would say between 11 and 20. And then when you get past 20, so 20 plus, that's high volume. And when you look at the research about what natural bodybuilders do, these men and women who are stepping on a bodybuilding stage, they are typically in the plus 20 for each body part, 23, 24 typically on average. And I don't like to say, hey, this is the best volume. What's a better way to look at this is what are you currently doing, and you want to make adjustments based on that. So if you were to just, let's say you're a month in and you're said, hey, I'm doing 18 cents, then I would say, I'd probably want you to be lifting for a year because you're already on the upper range of moderate. But if you typically do that, no, and I would also ask, is that working for you? Do you feel recovered from doing that twice per week and you're pretty excited about the next chest workout?
How do you know if you're properly recovered?
Well, this is very subjective. So it's, do you Do you not look forward to going to the gym? Are you fatigued? Are you not ever increasing your weights at all? And again, that's where you have to be pretty consistent with your rest periods and stuff. So is your motivation lower? What we would call readiness to train, is that not as high? Do you see yourself adapting to these workouts? And that's really a strength-based guide. Are you using heavier dumbbells today than you were 6 months ago? Are you getting an extra rep or two? So those would be the keys that we can rely on for proper recovery.
How do you know if a smaller muscle group is properly recovered when, for example, like we'll take biceps, for example, bicep curls. I mean, weights, dumbbells go up in 5-pound increments. So it's like a huge leap to go from like a 15 to 20 pound dumbbell to then doing like a 25 to 30 pound dumbbell.
Huge increase. So I can make an argument where we just take those things off the table. If you are working out, if your goal is to build a bigger bicep and you're going to near failure on whatever volume you're currently at, but that one set, the set you're doing, if you took that to near failure, you are maximizing the muscle protein synthesis of that muscle. That's all you have to worry about. Like, did I do that in that set? And this is where I would say in your case, doing 9 sets, it's possible that by your third exercise, now I do like the fact that you're altering your exercise as you do 3, but I would still make the argument, it's possible that your 8th and 9th set, I don't know if you're getting as much of an anabolic stimulus because you've already done 7 other sets for that muscle. Maybe you are, but there is it seems like there's a threshold at which at some point you can keep doing more and more sets, but you're not getting any anabolic benefit. I don't know if you ever heard the term junk volume.
Yeah, I was just gonna bring that up.
Yeah, that's kind of that kind of is in that category.
So wait, how do you know when the reps that you're doing are more junk volume?
Well, I don't think we have an answer to that. I would rely on the research that says that the more and more volume you do, it's not like you're building more and more muscle. So at some point there is a threshold where when we do more, but I can't say, oh yeah, that's 15 sets. I wish I could say that. So that's where I think a lot of individual variability comes into play.
What about for people who, are busy, chronically busy? Is there a minimal effective dose for building muscle?
Well, you can get great benefits from 1 set to failure. And even near failure. So if you're only doing 1 set per week on a body part, 1 set per workout, I would still want to do more than 1 workout per week. But you again, I'm just going to throw out arbitrary numbers. You might be getting 90% of the anabolic benefit from doing 1 hard set. And that's where I would really encourage, like what you do, do 1 set, but now let's do a drop set. So it's really like 3 sets in one.
What's a drop set for people who are unfamiliar?
Good call. So drop set would be, you just did let's just say bench press. You did a bench press for 10 reps, and that 10th rep was hard, but you got it. And now you're going to throw off some of the weight. You're going to reduce the weight, and you're going to do it. You're going to jump right into another set. And it's probably better for a machine that's like what I call like the pins that are selectorized. It's much easier. And then you do another set, and now you're really in pain because you have a lot of lactate in your muscles. And then you drop it again, and you do it again. So it's 1 long set, but it's 3 sets. And a study just was published. I haven't read it yet, but the synopsis was this was very effective for muscle growth. This very low volume but beyond volume drop set. So I have to read the study to.
Wow. So minimal effective dose. So basically, 1 really hard set performed twice per week.
Yeah, a lot of people think I have to be in the gym for hours, and I don't think that is true. Even if you have a lot of muscle mass and you reduce your volume significantly, you can maintain your current muscle mass when you drop volume as long as you're lifting intensely. Now, the debate would be, am I going to grow new muscle? I don't think that would be the case. If you're typically doing 18 and you go back to 2, let's say you do 2 hard sets every week, I think you would maintain. but I don't think you would have a hard time growing. You're growing more muscle tissue.
Interesting. So it's very effective at maintenance.
Especially for people, yes, who have been advanced, who are advanced in their lifting. They can really dial back their volume as long as the intensity is there and maintain. So very effective for maintenance. Yeah.
The more advanced you are, is that when you really start needing to increase the volume before you see real gains? I mean, I don't look like it, but I've been lifting pretty much my whole life, and I do find it getting. I mean, I'm also getting older, so there's maybe. I mean, my testosterone levels are actually pretty good, but I know as you get older, generally you tend to fight an uphill battle when it comes to the accrual of new muscle.
Yeah. So the volume question is it's puzzling to me, and I'll talk through this. When you more volume is better for muscle hypertrophy, and the reason I can say that is when you look at all of the as you increase volume and I always love to say this, when you look at different labs using different equipment, so ultrasound, MRI, DEXA, so you have different devices measuring muscle hypertrophy. You have different research groups designing different types of studies that increase volume. Generally, what we see is the more volume you do, the more muscle hypertrophy there is. The question becomes to me, if you're going to increase your volume 10% every, let's say every month, well, that's not sustainable when you go out 3 years. I mean, you're going to be doing 48 sets for one body part. So that I struggle with that because these research studies are usually 8 weeks, 12 weeks, but they're pretty consistent. The higher the volume, the more muscle hypertrophy.
Now, when it comes to, I love your nutrition posts. They're always, you have a real knack for presenting a problem with a counterintuitive solution. That's why I love your quizzes.
Yeah.
Really fun to follow you on social media. What would you say the big rocks are when it comes to nutritionally supporting your exercise?
Are we talking for somebody that's in a fitness lifestyle or more of a beginner?
Let's take both. I mean, I personally think everybody should be engaged with the fitness lifestyle. I mean,
no question.
It's so beneficial for health and longevity.
Yep.
But yeah, well, I mean, I guess let's take beginner first. And then, I'd be curious to know how that differs from somebody who's more, advanced.
Yeah. So beginners, I think the biggest hurdles that they face is they think they have to do the extreme to get results. There's a lack of appreciation for consistency and the amount of time that it takes to get a result. And that is, I don't hold them at fault because the messages that they're bombarded with, social media, advertising, it's made to appear that these things happen immediately. And clearly that is not the case. So a lack of patience and an inclination that I have to go to the extreme diets to get results. So those would be the low-hanging fruit. If I could tell somebody, hey, let's just eat as much whole foods as you're willing to eat, and let's give it time, you're going to improve your body composition if that's your goal. That's the beginner.
And you don't at that stage, you're not discussing like protein or anything like that yet?
For a beginner, no. For a beginner, I'm very much, if I say 8 things, I think it's overload. So if I'm working with a true beginner who I just described, my first move is to say, hey, here's what I'd like you to do. Just write down everything I don't want you to change, whatever. If you're an alcoholic, just keep drinking and write down every beer you drink. Just let me see what you do. And we know from research, just by journaling your food intake, you lose weight and you make better choices.
Just from journaling?
Oh, yeah. Just being conscious of what you're eating. Because what actually happens is Oreos, okay? Well, I'm going to eat 9 Oreos. And when they write it down as they're, I'm only going to have 5. And even though I say, don't change how you eat, it's very hard to not change how you eat. So again, I am a scientist and I'm full of facts, but that is not helpful to somebody to say, make sure you do this with protein, make sure you do. So now again, I've done a lot of protein research, so I can't wait to get to protein. But for a true beginner, let's start with, can you just write down what you eat for this week? And then like the next thing would be probably protein, because that's some of my research. And this is another fascinating thing about protein. If we just increase protein from a suboptimal to an optimal amount, that alone is a stimulus for building muscle and losing body fat. Multiple studies. And again, if you would have asked me that 10 years ago, no way. No way by increasing protein do you lose body fat. But there's multiple studies in humans that have reported it.
What do you think the mechanism there is?
I don't know. I know part of the mechanism for sure is protein has a higher thermic effect of food. So we know that. We also know that protein increases muscle protein synthesis. So there's an obvious stimulus for building some muscle. And let me be clear. If somebody's eating a gram per pound of protein and they're hearing us talking, they say, oh, I'm going to go to 2 grams. I'm not talking about, they're already at their threshold. But I'm talking about the average person who generally tends to not prioritize protein by getting them to what I would say an optimal amount. I mean, I define that as 0.75 to 1 gram per pound, or Europe 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kg. To me, that's the optimal range of protein. So the mechanism on muscle hypertrophy is it increases muscle protein synthesis. In terms of causing fat loss, we know 2 things. We know that protein has the highest thermic effect of food. So what that means is if you eat 100 calories of protein, your body has to work much harder to digest, absorb, and transport that protein than it does with carbs or fats. So it's about 25%. So if I have 100 calories of protein, I'm really only getting 75 net calories into my body because it took my body 25 calories of work to break apart these nitrogen bonds. And with fat, it's only like 2 calories out of 100. So fat doesn't take hardly any work for the body to digest. And then carbs are about 7% of the total calorie load. The other mechanism is it seemingly increasing not just the thermic effect of food, but also just total daily energy expenditure. It causes you to burn more calories throughout the day. And then we also have an impact on energy intake. So protein has it's the most satiating nutrient. So if you eat more protein, you're less hungry. So if I always tell people, if you have to overeat, try to overeat with protein, because that the damage to your body composition in terms of body fat accrual will be less. And in fact, I say this, and my science friends don't like it when I say this. I've never seen a study, and I'm talking about 4 or 5 or 6, where they have purposely overfed resistance training subjects, so people like you and I, when they overfed them on protein alone, so they didn't increase carbs or fats, they never gained body fat. They either maintained body fat or they lost body fat. And I mean anywhere from 250 extra calories, which I did in my lab with resistance trained females, up to, and this seems unbelievable, about 700 calories. You know Dr. Joey Antonio?
No.
He did a lot of this protein studies in the 2015, 2016. So even when you overfeed on protein, I have yet to read a study where, as long as protein's the only nutrient, body fat is not gained.
That's wild. So you could essentially eat your way into a calorie surplus, provided those calories are coming from protein.
And provided you are resistance training.
And you're resistance training, and
Yes.
you won't gain additional fat, according to the literature.
Yes. And again, If you asked me that 7 years ago, and if you want, I mean, I always say this, don't let your listeners just believe me. I can send you the studies.
No, we love it. Wow. We've actually never heard that on the podcast before, that for somebody who's chronically under eating protein, that just increasing your protein intake alone will help put on muscle.
And those studies are not resistance training. These are The only intervention, adding protein. And one of those studies that I'm referring to, and these are all female studies, one, I think 50 to 80 in one, but another one was where they had women diet. So they all dieted by the same number of calories. And then researchers had them have one scoop of, I think it was whey protein. So there's they're all dieting, but now they're not dieting as much, right? When you add in 80 calories of a scoop of protein, and they lost more fat. Not dieting is hard. They lost more fat.
Wow.
Crazy, right?
I know, it's insane. It's insane. Yeah. I mean, so, you know, right now, obviously everybody's talking about the Make America Healthy Again movement, and what's come under scrutiny have been the dietary guidelines in the past. And, you know, one question that I have when hearing you talk about the value of protein and how it's such a powerful tool for fighting off adiposity, you know, excess fat storage, like how come the dietary guidelines don't just come out and say, like, these, you know, the dietary guidelines for Americans committee doesn't just come out and say, Americans, like, prioritize protein. Like, it ought to be as simple as that. Just from hearing the way that you're talking about protein and all of its benefits, its satiety value, you know, the fact that you get a caloric-free ride, in the context of a country where almost 1 in 2 of us are obese, like, how come nobody at the governmental level, you know, is saying prioritize protein? It could be distilled down to something as simple as that.
I think so, yeah. And I don't know why, but I think we both appreciate the fitness community has figured this out. Like, right? I mean, people that are fit, they know that we need higher protein, and that's probably, I mean, success. Would you say success leaves clues?
Yeah.
So yeah. It's I imagine, and this is not my area, it has something to do with special interests and who's pulling funding levers. I don't know that, but that's my cynical view of why that's not being promoted more.
But do you think that heuristic, like, do you think that something as simple as that could actually help move the needle?
Yeah, based on the randomized, placebo-controlled studies. Yeah, and let me also say, it's hard to when you do these protein studies, it's hard to hide the protein. But have you ever heard of the protein leverage hypothesis?
I'm familiar, but yeah,
Okay.
Unpack that for us.
So if you're familiar, I will unpack it. But it's what you just said. It's been studied. So I think it initiated in grasshoppers. A group of researchers from Australia is the first group that I came across that propagated this. And basically the protein leverage hypothesis. And again, I always put this in the context of our nutrition, like our government discussions, the nutrition nerds, they're always fighting about low carb or low fat. Like, it's just carbs versus fat argument. And we have the energy balance model of obesity, and we have the carbohydrate insulin model of obesity. Again, that's a carb versus fat argument. And way in the background, kind of ignored like a middle child maybe, is this, what about protein? Nobody talks protein. And there is a model. It's called the protein leverage hypothesis. And sorry, I talk with my hands.
We like it. It's okay.
So the protein leverage hypothesis says when you wake up in the morning, you have a certain amount of hunger that you're going to have throughout the day. And until you get, let's say, this much protein into your body, your hunger is going to be high. But once you get your daily allotment of protein, your hunger subsides. And now you're not going to be hungry. And until you get that, because you're hungry and because in our nutrition environment, we have a lot of ready-to-eat, highly or ultra-processed foods. That's what a lot of people tend to grab because they're quick. And I'm hungry and I want to be full. But guess what ultra-processed foods don't have? Protein. So they're getting all of these calories, but they're not giving them satiety. So they'll keep eating and eating. Whereas if we did meet our protein threshold, then we would not be as hungry and we wouldn't be eating as much. And there are, I recently read, it's probably a couple years old, but a study, if we have time, I can discuss it.
Please, yeah.
It was fascinating, just a really cool study. researchers designed diets that were low in protein, moderate protein, and then high protein. And just to make this easy, I'm just going to say low versus higher protein, because the two higher protein didn't really matter. And they had the subjects live in a research facility. So no ability to cheat. They were only allowed to eat what the researchers could observe them eating. And they had unlimited access to food. And they disguised if it was low protein or higher protein. And I can't remember how long the study was, but I believe several weeks, maybe 2 weeks. And it was enough time to to legitimately measure body weight changes, et cetera. And what they found was, again, they couldn't tell the difference if they were eating low or high protein. The study had really cool pictures of the meals, and the meals looked exactly the same. And when they analyzed the results, when they were given low protein, they ate significantly more calories, which really validated the protein leverage hypothesis. That study alone would have done a lot of harm to the people who adhere to that diet, because that was a very well controlled study. So the low protein, they ate significantly more calories, they gained more weight. And then the one thing that puzzled me was there was no difference in hunger during the study. And I'm like, well, that's weird, because when you eat lower protein, this theory says you're hungry. And then I realized, well, of course there was no difference in hunger. The low protein group ate significantly more calories to make them not as hungry. So it made sense. But I remember at first I'm like, I couldn't quite figure it out. And of course, my students figured it out immediately. I'm like, why did it take me like 2 hours and I'm struggling?
That's hilarious. But I just we need to break this prioritize protein adage out from, we're having these conversations on podcasts, but I feel like Americans need to know.
Yeah. Hey, I'm doing my part, right?
You are. As am I.
Yes.
But it's so simple. It's such a simple rule of thumb to, that I think could really move the needle.
Let me ask you this, because I always have this thought. To me, a higher protein diet is often a wealthy nation, like it's a luxury almost. Is there any sense that we don't want to propagate that because it's unfair to people who don't have our means? I mean, that's something that...
Very important question. Yeah. I mean, the food equity continues to be a problem. Access to, high protein, properly raised whole foods continues to be an issue. And there continues to be uneven distribution in this country and around the world. And so that is an issue. But I don't think that it's serving us to think so dichotomously, like it's either a black or white issue. Mm-hmm. We could promote this idea that high protein diets are in many ways an antidote to our modern problems of overconsumption of ultra processed foods, while also doing the work to help foster access for lower income communities, access to foods like properly raised red meat, chicken, eggs, things like that. I mean, eggs recently were at all-time highs in terms of their cost. I know many Americans were struggling to afford eggs, and I think the prices are coming down at this point.
And that's sad, because historically, I remember eggs like being cheap and such a high quality protein. So that's very frustrating.
Yeah. So how can listeners, viewers capitalize on this protein leverage hypothesis? I mean, is this why sometimes you hear that eating a really high protein breakfast is a great way to start the day because it helps to minimize your hunger over the subsequent 16 hours?
I think that makes sense for some people. So, like, personally, I'm not hungry in the morning, so I tend to not eat right away because I feed my hunger drive, and I know I'm hungrier in the afternoon and evening. So I'll save those calories, so to speak, because then I'm less likely to overeat over the day. I have a pretty large appetite. Just to answer the question, I think it's just a mindset or a paradigm of I call it a protein-anchored, flexible diet approach, or just what you said, prioritizing protein. So essentially, when you're going to eat, let's try to do what we can to make sure that there's a portion of protein in the foods that we're eating.
Is there any? Do you have any concern from a muscle maintenance standpoint? So do you practice what I guess some people call intermittent fasting? I mean, are you not, how many hours after you wake up are you having your first meal of the day?
Typically, I don't eat until, well, let me give a little context. If somebody's goal is to maximize muscle mass, so if that's their primary goal, then we know, based on human-based research, the ideal is you get your total protein, let's just say a gram per pound to make it easy, and then you want to divide that up into approximately equal protein feedings, evenly distributed throughout the day. 8 a.m., noon, 4, 8 p.m., something to that effect. So if somebody's goal is I want to build as much muscle as I can, there's the playbook. In my case, I am, by not eating until 10, 11, sometimes noon, I am knowingly leaving some muscle on the table, so to speak. But I'm more concerned, I struggle more with gaining excess body fat. So I say, okay, I don't want to lose muscle, but I would rather make it easier for me to not overeat, because I struggle with overeating more than I do other things. So that's why I'm not eating till 10, 11, 12. People will say to me, oh, you're intermittent fasting. And I say, sure, but I like to say I'm not eating breakfast, because I know that brings a lot of other, and I'm not against intermittent fasting in fact, I guess I do it, but I don't like all the labels that come with it.
Yeah.
But I have nothing against it.
All the dogma and like magical thinking.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So call it what you want. I just say I don't eat till 11 or 12 as my first meal. And it works for me, because I am not hungry in the morning.
Well, I love this idea that there's no such thing as a one size fits all approach.
Yeah, within reason, yeah.
With your first meal, you're I'm assuming you're making protein the bulk of what it is that you're building that meal around.
But really no different than my other meals. It's typically, maybe I try to get around 50 grams of protein in that meal. So, yeah.
When it comes to nutrition for building muscle, losing fat, are there any myths on social media that drive you particularly nuts?
So building muscle, losing fat, false. No, I one pet peeve I have is I don't like how the scientists argue over such small things, because I think that just serves it gets people more confused. Like if we would we all agree that we want to prioritize protein. There's nobody in my or your space that's going to disagree. But we will argue, well, you should have 5 versus 4 feedings. So I think my pet peeve is more at the scientists who kind of drive a lot of the conversation, arguing over or trying to be known for one thing, and then they dig in. That bothers me more than I guess other things. Oh, and I can't stand when people demonize healthy foods. Like that's something that I've seen. I don't even know who or what, but my dad was saying, hey, I can't have an apple, or I'm not eating apples. I'm like, why aren't you going to eat apples? And I don't even remember what he said, but he had an argument. I'm like, Dad, I think it was because of the pesticides. And again, wash the apple, or peel it if you need to, but eat apples. Like, don't be scared of apples. So that one hit home.
Yeah, there's this like myth that I've seen in some pockets on social media that we ought to fear fruit, that it's the fruit that's making us fat.
Yeah, that's not true.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm a big, I love whole fruit. It's self-limiting, it's satiating, the water content, the fiber content, the phytochemical content. I mean, I think fruit is all good. So prioritize protein, whole foods. Is it ever too late to adopt a resistance training regimen? I mean, are you ever, if resistance training hasn't been a major part of your life and you're in your 70s or 80s, like, is it ever too late to pick up, a dumbbell?
Yeah, I almost didn't let you finish because I wanted to yell out, no, never too late. We have research in 80-year-olds that build muscle. Clearly getting strength there's no question. But even building muscle, I think, well, you're 80 years old. No, when you start resistance training, now you're not going to build as much muscle when you were 20. Always a benefit of lifting weights.
Always.
Yeah. Well, again, we're not doing, if somebody's not doing if they're doing unsafe exercises like trying to do a barbell squat on top of a stability ball. But no, yeah, I've never read a study where somebody lifted where they lifted weights and they didn't gain strength or hypertrophy.
That's great to know. Yeah, my dad is in his 70s and he's never worked out a day in his life. And me and my brothers are always trying to push him to do something. But then on the other hand, we're like a little bit nervous. Like he's in his 70s. He's never picked up a weight in his life. Like it's just a recipe for injury.
So I have that same fear. I remember years ago I watched somebody, like an elderly man who really struggled to get on a stationary bike, and this trainer did a great job. She got him on the bike, and I was just like, he's going to fall and he's going to break something. Of course he didn't. No, I think there's probably a great, and again, I get it. I'm very fearful of injury, and like, I think there's more harm in not starting than just letting them go. But I would ask for your dad, if he likes whatever he likes doing, I would really lean into that as his major. At 70 years old, does he like to walk? Does he like to do squats on a stability ball? Like whatever he likes to do, I would lean into that and say, hey, this counts. Yeah, good.
Interesting. Is there an optimal time of day to work out for results?
Not that I found. Oh, funny story on that. I think it was a magazine. They called me like 5 years ago. They said, hey, we're doing this story on, and what I learned quickly, they wanted me to say there is a best time. So I did some research and I couldn't find any. Not that this is my career-long, passion to find out what time of the day was best, but I couldn't find it, and needless to say, they moved on to somebody else who could find that research that I couldn't find, or that could make an argument.
Interesting. Yeah, are you familiar at all with Dr. Sachin Panda's work? He's down at the Salk Institute, and he's one of the pioneers of in the field of circadian biology.
I'm not. No.
It's very interesting. Well, ultimately, I would agree with you. The answer seems to be no. Like whatever time of day you can get to the gym, like make it fit to your schedule. But we're diurnal creatures, and so there are certain aspects of our physiology, of our mind muscle connection, perhaps I guess you could say, that are timed in accordance with the where the sun is in the sky. So we're more alert maybe in the morning, but we're more coordinated later in the day. Mm-hmm. Seems to be what the research shows. Like we might be less prone to injury at a certain point in the day as compared to others.
Well, if this is what this person does, this research, I would defer to their expertise in that area. That's really cool, though.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But ultimately, I don't think it has an impact on like muscle gain or anything like that. But it's just there are interesting considerations that I thought you might be privy to. Okay, so this is kind of a funny question, but I think having it answered by an exercise scientist might be interesting fodder. If you could only do one exercise for the rest of your life, what would it be and why?
It would be back squats. And the funny answer is because I don't like them. But because I don't like them, I'm getting a mental win. So to me, it's more like, hey, I just did a set of squats, or, my workout is literally 2 hard sets of squats. I don't like it. I don't look forward to doing it. But every time I'm done, I'm like, okay, now when I go read 3 research papers, that's going to be easy compared to this. So to me, it's more mental than physical.
Yeah, the mental game is half the battle, at least.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Does the delayed onset muscle soreness get better the more you do an exercise?
Yes, yeah. In fact, for a lot of people, it's doesn't exist once you're into a routine. Well, you work out a lot. Are you always sore or not really? How sore do you get?
Well, it's apropos for me because I wasn't able to work out for about a month and a half after.
Yeah, so you're gonna be sore.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I haven't been able to exercise for a month and a half, but I've just now started to get back to the gym, and I had a leg workout. Yeah, like 5 days ago or something like that, and I wasn't even using very heavy weights. I'm working out at, I would say, 50% of my usual capacity, and to this day, 5 days later, my ass is still sore.
Getting up slow. That's coming off of a layoff. And I won't say that you're not sore just because you work out all the time, but it's nothing like what obviously you're experiencing now. And I've done it many times in my life taken a month or two off, and I go back, and for some dumb reason I do lunges or something that tear you up, and then I'm like, I can't sit down very fast. So, but
Getting
yeah,
on and off the toilet, that's
it's almost funny.
wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Yeah, it's a problem. Something interesting that I learned, wonder if you could speak to this. So I actually, it was the first 2 days after that workout. I mean, my legs were so sore, it was making my day like miserable. So I took I took some Tylenol, which I read is actually, you don't want to take NSAID drugs because drugs like Advil can actually have a negative impact on.
Yeah, they suppress the protein synthetic response to the workout. So I think I've read 2 studies saying that same thing.
Yeah, it's very interesting. But what hadn't occurred to me up until I looked into it, because I was like dying, and I needed to take the Tylenol. Tylenol is interesting because it's actually not anti-inflammatory. It's a pain relieving. It's an analgesic, but it's not. It doesn't have an anti-inflammatory effect.
Yeah, okay.
And so if you're gonna take any kind of pain relieving medication for delayed onset muscle soreness, you're better off taking, I suppose, Tylenol, because it's not going to blunt in any significant way the muscle protein synthesis effect.
And then back to the muscle soreness. The scientists call this the fact that you get less sore the more you do workouts. They call that the repeated bout effect. So this has been studied, and the more you do something, the less and less sore you get, unless you take time off.
Yeah. What about supplements to help with recovery? I know, correct me, I mean, I haven't looked at this literature in a very long time, but I know that BCAAs are generally a waste of money, but if I recall correctly, there was some data linking it to reduced DOMS, reduced delayed onset muscle soreness.
Yeah, that is one benefit of branched chain amino acids. But I agree with you. If you're already taking like whey protein or a high quality protein supplement, you're getting a third of whey protein is BCAAs. So you're getting a lot of BCAAs in your whey protein. And I don't want to be just pounding the table for protein, but protein is it's the best nutrient for helping with soreness.
That's good to know.
Mm-hmm. And muscle damage. It lowers muscle damage. But if you only took BCAAs, that is one of their reported benefits.
What about essential amino acid supplements? Are you a fan of those?
I prefer to just take normal protein, but if I were going to not take whey protein or casein, which is comes from milk, I would take essential amino acids. But here's how I like to describe why I say this. Your muscles are made up of approximately 20 amino acids. The essential amino acids are 9. So you're going to have to convert some of those essential into the non-essential to actually build new muscle. So why not just take all of them, and then I'm giving my muscles everything they need. So to me, it's money that I'd rather not spend.
So generally, whole protein trumps any of these. Yeah.
Yep.
That makes a lot of sense. From the standpoint of longevity, why is muscle mass important? Having muscle mass.
So we know 2 things. As we age, we lose muscle mass. And then when that gets to a certain point, we call that sarcopenia, which is the loss of muscle mass and function. And for the last couple of years, I've switched my research into like menopause fitness. And one of the things that just jumps out as a body composition researcher is women during their menopause transition, which on average is mid to late 40s, early 50s. Not only is there an accelerated rate of body fat gain during this time, but it's for the first time in a woman's life, she's starting to lose lean mass. And we know this is happening. So what are the things that can buffer this? A resistance training stimulus, and then an optimal protein diet to allow the body to adapt to that anabolic stimulus. So I look at that as not even an older, 70s, 80s, 90s, but midlife as well. And same thing for me. I'm 50. I think in males, I'm trying to think back to one of my multiple choice questions. I think it's like at 46 years old, 48, where we start to lose lean mass.
Are there ways of supporting hormone production, sex hormone production, I guess specifically, nutritionally as we get older?
I know. Well, one thing is like a very low carbohydrate diet tends to suppress endogenous or your body's natural testosterone production. Another mechanism would be that it lowers SBHG, sex-binding globulin hormone, which that binds testosterone. So a very low carbohydrate diet is not the best if your goal is to build as much muscle as you can. And I'm not anti-ketogenic diet. I think there's a lot of benefits to that diet, but one of them is not maximizing muscle mass. In terms of other like nutritional, I'm not aware, but I am aware of some dietary supplements that have been effective. I'm trying to think of some of the ingredients. I think ashwagandha, boron in menopause aged women. So there are specific ingredients. Tribulus terrestris. These are just some of the ingredients that naturally raise testosterone levels, but that's more supplemental.
Yeah. What about creatine?
Love it. Take it. Give it to my children. But
To your children?
oh yeah, I have two
Wow.
daughters. Yeah, and my wife, but my wife always forgets to take it. Yeah, creatine is. I don't think it has an impact on testosterone, but it's funny. That started as a sports supplement, build muscle, sprint faster, and I'm not on top of this literature at all, but I'm aware now it is well beyond diet. It is well beyond sports. Stroke recovery, autism. What else? Just I don't want to say anti-aging, but dementia prevention, like increasing creatine levels. It's not just going to make you stronger. It's gonna be very beneficial for just chronic health. And again, there's a lot of research. I'm just not up to date with it, but
Should people be taking it whether or not they're resistance training?
yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah, because I've always thought about it as a bodybuilding supplement.
Yes. Yeah. And again, it's a lot. And one of the areas, and again, I can't follow up because I haven't read this, but the levels that we know we need to take to get into our muscles is a certain amount. Most people saturate muscles with 5 grams per day over 30 days, and then they can maintain it. But they're looking at getting brain levels saturated or higher, and that's a much higher dosage than what our muscles need. So I know that's an ongoing area, and I can't follow up because I haven't read the research.
Well, how much do you take every day, and how much does your wife take, and how much?
My wife doesn't take any generally because every time I look at her bowl, it's I just like taking like a teaspoon every day, so about 5 grams per day. And my kids, they get it when I put it in their smoothies. They're not taking it on their own. So when I'm making their smoothies, I'm putting it into their smoothies.
What else do you put in your kids' smoothies?
We put pineapple. I put in banana and orange, frozen strawberries, sometimes whey protein. Then I have another, what I call the Green Hulk shake, where that's spinach, green grapes, an orange, and same thing, sometimes whey protein. So
That's so cool.
And ice, yeah.
Wow. And how old are your kids?
13 and 17.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's going to be news to a lot of people that that children can take creatine safely.
Yeah, so I want to say, because I'm always very careful, I'm not telling you to give your kids creatine, but I am saying I give creatine to your body. So we're clear, your body makes creatine. We just don't make enough to saturate our muscle cells. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. There's research on concussion recovery. If you have a concussion and you have low levels of creatine, your recovery time is much worse than if you've saturated muscle levels of creatine. So my daughter does gymnastics, so that's always in the back of my mind. I want her to have, I want to supplement her natural production of creatine levels in case she were to get injured and have a concussion.
Here's a really stupid question, but I'm not an athlete, nor do I know anything about sports, but is creatine legal for use in professional sports?
As far as I know, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's good to know, yeah, because I would imagine if you're, a footballer or, a martial artist, and you risk getting hit in the head, Like that would be a really beneficial.
Yes.
I mean, for many reasons to take creatine, but prophylactically for brain health.
Yep. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. There's a whole world now that it's not just sports performance. It is brain health, neurological. It's and let me just mention 2 names in case people want to look at this further for people who are much more qualified. So Dr. Darren Kandow.
Oh, we've had him on the show. He's brilliant. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So Dr. Richard Kreider, who was my mentor, and then Mark Tarnopolsky, who's so is Darren, but Canadian researcher. If you just search those 3 gentlemen, those are the creatine experts.
Love that.
They literally just held a creatine conference in Germany. I think it was Germany, literally this week. So, yeah, and they get into all of the health stuff.
Wow, what a specific conference.
The creatine conference,
Yeah.
I think that's what they called it.
I love that. Tell us about your research and the kinds of things that you study in your lab. And I know that you are embarking on this really cool menopause-related project.
Yes. So historically, my research has been basically, well, I like to say that my research helps people optimize their physiques within a maintainable lifestyle. So I love learning from bodybuilders and then dialing back what they do to what people like normal people like me and my wife can do without being that extreme. So trying to build muscle, trying to not have excess body fat. And I've done that my entire career. Mostly my research is in females. So, and then over the last 2 years, a big shift in the population that I've studied. So I still describe myself as a fat loss scientist because that's what I study. And one of the things, and the reason this shift towards midlife females or women going through menopause is because my wife, probably about 4 years ago now, had a very bad experience going through menopause. And my wife's very private, but she's given me permission to talk about this publicly. And actually in my I have a YouTube series on menopause fitness. My producer, Joey Thurman, was able to have my wife actually be on camera, which was an amazing event. So she told her story, and the amount of feedback that we got was amazing because what we've learned, which I already knew this once I started down this line, there's a lot of women who have a bad experience and nobody talks about it. Now, I think it's starting to get a lot better. So when my wife went on and shared her story, it really resonated with a lot of women. So my wife had a lot of issues. She didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what was going on. I couldn't help her, but she actually tried to hide things from me. She did. She hid a lot from me. I just thought, this is not normal. Like, we have a good marriage, and things were just weird. But one of the things that happened was she gained, I don't know, maybe 15 pounds. But when you're fit your whole life and you gain 15 pounds, that's a lot of extra weight. And that was bothering her. That was not the worst of her problems. But I'm thinking, well, you're married to a fat loss scientist, so this is, if you're going to have any problems, and if that's one of them, and I have helped her diet in the past, like she would go on diets and I would, prescribe the exercise, nutrition, would always lose weight, and it wouldn't work. Like I couldn't help her lose body fat, which is very humbling for me. Like, I'm supposed to be this expert. And again, once I started talking about this, not mentioning her initially, but just, starting to have conversations, it's ubiquitous. It's a lot of women. They gain, again, the research supports this, but we don't have research yet that has addressed or even asked, why can't they lose this weight? So that's really what I'm interested in now is, we know that women gain weight during menopause, and it's likely due to hormone transition. I want to investigate, why is there weight loss resistance? And again, I can't prove that that's a thing. I just have anecdotal evidence from my wife and thousands of other women who have reached out to me. But I believe it's a thing, and it's very frustrating as a scientist because all of the things that I've even published on don't seem to work in this population. And also, not every woman is going to experience this. I don't want to cast a very bad scenario. Some women go through this with no problem. Some have a little bit of struggles, but a sub-segment of this menopause transition population are going to gain weight and have a hard time losing it.
Is it due to a metabolic slowdown, or is it the decline in muscle mass?
Well, we know they lose muscle mass, and we know that that decreases your metabolism. And it's interesting. People will say, well, your metabolism doesn't slow down when we age. But usually those studies, they're reporting metabolic rate relative to muscle mass. So when you make it relative to muscle mass, your metabolism is slowing down, from 2,000 to 1,800 calories. But relative to your muscle mass, it's a straight line, because if you lose muscle mass, well, yeah, your metabolism is going to match that. So that's one of the, there's a pet peeve of, taking research. You can always report data in different ways, and depending on how you want to report it, you have a different narrative. I don't have a lot of answers, which is, part of why I'm excited to I think, pioneering this weight loss research. Again, I have to say, as a scientist, if this exists, so the first thing I have to do is validate, are you truly not able to lose weight when you're in a caloric deficit? So that's the first thing I have to validate. But I do think it's hormonal related, but why not being able to lose the weight? Those are the questions I have.
But it sounds like it's that at the very least, the loss of muscle mass is playing a role.
Well, let me just say that clearly can't help, but a caloric deficit, regardless of if you lost muscle or not, that shouldn't matter on losing the body weight. Gaining the body weight, yes, right? If you slower metabolism, less muscle, less activity. And again, I want to be fair. A lot of other scientists and evidence-based people, like in our space, they don't believe this is an occurrence. So this is uncharted territory. But that's why for somebody like me, I've published a lot of studies that have, I think, contributed to people's evidence-based beliefs on weight loss. I've done a lot of weight loss research in young, fit people. So for me to say, I think there's something going on here, or at least I'm willing to acknowledge that there could be an issue that I can't explain. I just want other people to, say, okay, well, maybe we don't know something. And here's another thought I've had on this. This is the first time in civilization where we've had a fit population of women that are now reaching middle age. So I look at like my mom's generation. They weren't living a fitness lifestyle. They were never lifting weights. Even when I was in undergrad, there weren't many women in the weight room. There were very few. But now, thankfully, we've had, the last 20 years or 30 years, women lifting weights, being fit. And now they're going through menopause, and all of we have, data in every other population, but I've looked and we don't have research in this population. So it's new. It's uncharted for the most part.
Wow. Well, your work is super important.
I'm telling you, I couldn't be more. I get up every day excited to. I never would have thought I would be reading menopause research, and now I cannot read enough.
Wow.
Well, because it also brings in, I have to learn estradiol, progesterone. Like, it's not just diet and exercise. I'm having to learn the endocrinology aspect of this, which I love. I love learning.
Well, you're a brilliant scientist, and it sounds like you're a very loving husband as well. So.
That's what I try to. That's the message that I try to propagate.
Is there a best form of exercise for fat loss?
Yes, and it's cardio. So if somebody says, I want to lose as much fat as I can in the next 7 days, I would say don't lift weights, do cardio. If that's the goal, because cardio burns fat. Resistance exercise burns fat as well, but cardio burns more calories per unit time. And the energy balance model says if you're in a negative energy deficit, you'll burn more fat. But I also am very conscious of not doing over like cardio bunny mentality. I need to do 4 hours of cardio, because if you lose muscle mass in your pursuit of trying to lose body fat, so if somebody says, oh, do cardio, that's what the fat loss scientist said. What happens is when you lose muscle, as soon as your diet is over, your body now will do everything it can to add back that fat that you lost. And the more muscle you lost, the more likely it is that you're going to gain that body fat back quickly and at rates greater than what you had before you even started the diet. So that's why muscle, we want to protect muscle. And that's why, I mean, I answered the question you asked, but a combination of resistance and cardio work is the best, because then you're protecting the muscle, which is predictive of long-term fat loss maintenance.
Yeah. So, I mean, doing muscle preservation at all costs is generally.
Yep. That is what one thing in my entire career. We want people to lose body fat. That's what we study. But we enter all of our studies with the mindset we are going to prioritize fat loss, but we are right underneath that. We're going to do everything we can to maintain the lean mass.
Very important. And also, I mean, would you agree that it's easier to eat your way into a calorie deficit than to try to burn your way into a calorie deficit?
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
Which essentially implies that, you know, it can be miserable trying to burn off 500 calories, 300 to 500, whatever it takes to get you into a calorie deficit on a cardio machine, as compared to just like not eating the 300 to 500 calorie ultra processed junk.
Yep, I totally agree.
That you might otherwise be eating while watching the latest season of White Lotus.
Yes, yep. And that's why the combination of a caloric deficit plus cardio is really powerful.
Is there a best type of cardio? Because I know certain forms of cardio actually can increase hunger, thereby making it a little bit more difficult of a journey.
No, I usually tend to do the mode of cardio that you enjoy the most, because that's what you're probably going to keep doing. So I looked at high intensity versus moderate intensity, and it seems like as when the calories are controlled, it seemed fairly equal. So I'm not aware of one being you have to do elliptical at this intensity. Yeah.
Super interesting. Well, Dr. Bill Campbell, thank you so much for coming out. I've got one last question for you, but before we get to that, where can people connect with you on social media? How can they support your new menopause work?
Okay. Thank you for asking that.
Of course.
So Instagram is Bill Campbell, PhD. And as you said, I use that as an education platform, ask multiple choice, true, false questions. And then for my YouTube Menopause Fitness and Nutrition series, that's just follow me on my YouTube channel. That's Bill Campbell, PhD.
Love it. What does living a genius life mean to you?
I've never been asked that, so give me a second. What does living a genius? I would say the thought that came first was being prepared to answer, being prepared for life, for questions, having an answer as to why I do what I do. Which is not easy, right? If I'm going to be prepared, I've got to do my work. So it's a little anxiety ridden when I answer that.
Yeah, but you've clearly done your homework, and it's a great. That's great advice. Do your homework so that when you get to the point where you're being asked the important questions, you know how to answer them.
Yes, and it's funny. I was very excited to be a guest on your podcast, and I just was kind of reflecting. And like, man, all the years, because I didn't know what you were going to ask. And I just remember like, hey, I've done all of this work. So yeah, that thought kind of manifested even on the drive over here.
Ooh, I appreciate that. And it's actually, first of all, I'm grateful that you came out, and I hope it was a good conversation for you. But I give myself the same little pep talk. Like I still get nervous when I go on, big podcasts, and I'm like, look, as long as you're being honest about what you know, what you don't know, and you lead with integrity and love for what it is that you do and for the people that you're hopefully reaching, then you can't do wrong. You really can't. Yep. So thank you so much again for coming out. This was illuminating, and thank you all for listening out there in podcast land. Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.